Hello and welcome to World Talks, and I'm your host, Sasha Farbach. Now, recent elections in Wisconsin and Florida have brought the spotlight back to some key political players. Now, in Wisconsin, Elon Musk's massive financial support of conservative candidates did not sway voters who opted to keep a liberal majority on the state Supreme Court. Now, meanwhile, in Florida, Republicans held on to their seats in two special elections, but with narrower margins than expected, raising concerns about the party's future in these key districts. Now, amidst these results, Trump has raised questions about whether Musk will remain involved in government as the tech mogul continues to influence the political landscape. Now, to unpack all this, we're joined by Professor Scott Lucas from the University College Dublin. Good to have you back in the program. Now, is this a sign, I'll start right off with the bat, is this a sign of weakening support for Trump and Musk? How do you assess all this from yesterday?
Well, I think we have to emphasize, first of all, that these are early and very special cases, especially the Supreme Court election in Wisconsin, which got so much publicity amidst Elon Musk attempts to effectively buy that election for the Republicans. But yes, I think it's a sign that in Wisconsin, which was a swing state, Donald Trump won it by only 1% last November, that the Republicans are slipping. Susan Crawford, the Democratic candidate, won by 10%, despite Musk's high-profile intervention. I think the question is, did the Republicans slip in part because the Democrats are gathering more support, because of their uncertainty over Trump's actions, including the attempts with Musk to destroy the U.S. government, including economic downturn, or because of just simply a reaction against Musk himself? Florida is perhaps even more interesting, however, because you didn't have that high-profile factor of Musk, yet the Republican majority, which was about 35% for Trump last November, shrank to around 15% in each of those two special elections. Now, the Republicans still held the seats. They still have enough support, to keep those seats in Congress. But I think it's a sign that people who are not diehard Trumpists, including some Republicans, are starting to feel uncertainty about the direction of the country under his leadership, less than 3 months into his second term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to dig in on that. You said that there's already a kind of a slipping here. I mean, on the context of a wider sense here, is this voter disappointment? Will this continue? How do you see this? Is this already the barometer of a nation on a wider scale?
Well, I think beyond the high-profile headlines about Trump each day, which usually are around uncertainty and, let's be honest, chaos, there were two important issues that were behind his victory last November. They were immigration and the economy. Now, he's still doing well on immigration with voters, in large part because the Biden administration brought down immigration across the U.S.-Mexico border by 75% in 2024. So he can still ride that wave. But on the economy, you already have signs that the American of slippage. Inflation is beginning to go back up. Unemployment is very sticky. The stock market is extremely volatile. And of course, you have high-profile stories about tariffs, which could be quite damaging. So I think for a marker for your viewers to watch, when Donald Trump took office in January, he had an approval rating of just over 50%. Now, that approval rating is still just over 47%, so that hasn't really dropped that much. But his disapproval rating has risen from 41% to almost 50%. So it's those voters who are not committed to Trump and who really want to see an improvement in their day-to-day lives that are beginning to turn against him. And I think that's what is going to be trouble for him going forward, especially given what is likely to be further damage to the U.S. economy, in large part because of those tariffs that he is set to announce today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also I think it's curious about Musk. I mean, he really much stepped forward and very much committed huge financial buy-in into the result in Wisconsin. That didn't seem to work out. So what does that mean for Musk at this point, that relationship between Donald Trump and Musk? I mean, he already said, Trump said just, I think very recently, that he thinks that Musk will return to his company. Is he seen as a liability at this point? How do you characterize this?
No, I don't think that Musk is seen as a liability by Trump. I think that that Trump comment needs to be put into context. There's a problem for the administration because Elon Musk and his men from his companies who've been ripping apart U.S. agencies, they don't have legal status. They don't have legal status as U.S. government officials. They don't have security clearances. They don't have authorization to take all those documents they've been effectively stealing. So the question of Musk's legal status was going to cause a problem for the administration. So Trump can say now, oh, he's not officially a government employee. He's going to move back to his businesses soon. Meanwhile, Musk has been able to put his people inside U.S. government agencies who are now employees. They're inside the Department of Defense, they're inside the Social Security Administration, they're inside other agencies, and he has effectively got them there to swing billions of dollars to his companies, to companies like Tesla, to companies like Starlink and like SpaceX. So in a way, he's achieved his goal of boosting his businesses. So even if he takes a kind of a back seat now in the government, well, he's already won in that sense, even if it has damaged the administration politically.
Mm-hmm. But there's this, I want to ask you about this 130-day rule, because he's supposedly the special employee, 130 days. I think he himself has said he can achieve all of these cuttings of Doge, et cetera, across the federal government in less than that time. What do you make of that? Was this always the plan? Is this, is he backtracking here? Is this spin? How do you assess this?
I think that 130-day rule is the one that Musk was in risk of being in violation of. I think he's already in violation of it because, in fact, he doesn't even have the status of a special government employee in terms of the legal documentation. But even if he doesn't have that documentation, you could have the pretense until about early June. And then you're going to face legal difficulties. So I think that is part of it. But I think part of it is also because reality is going to set in. Look, the so-called Department of Government Efficiency has cut very little spending. And the spending that they have cut has simply been by firing thousands of employees. It's not been by cutting waste. Spending under the Trump administration in its first 2.5 months in office is projected to go up by 7.5%. So in other words, government spending is increasing, not decreasing, even as Musk is proclaiming with no evidence whatsoever that he's cut many billions of dollars. So I think in part it was that the illusion is going to wear off around Musk, and in part it is, look, how much longer can you put up this idea that what he is doing is legal and constitutional?
Mm-hmm. But also in the sense, will this come back to haunt Donald Trump? And also, we've seen very much a public announcement, very much of Musk and Trump. I mean, remember that Tesla rally right in front of the White House? I mean, that's there, that happened. So is this going to impact this relationship down the line? Will there be blowback from this and go into the midterms?
Well, I mean, the question about the politics goes back to that fundamental, that American phrase, it's the economy, stupid, which is, if the American economy was to rebound, if inflation was to drop, if you were to have a growth in GDP, I think people will forgive Trump all his, let's say, peculiarities, all his chaos. But if you wind up having many people being unemployed, and remember, you have 1.3 million federal employees at risk of being purged by Trump and Musk, if you have inflation going up, if you have manufacturing plants and farmers who suffer the effects of the tariffs, then no, I think you're going to have the Trump administration suffering the political effects. Now, will that lead to Donald Trump turning against Elon Musk in a high-profile spat? I can't predict that, because the fact of the matter here is that you have two narcissists sitting in the same space, and narcissists quite often can get upset with each other. But that said, Trump and Musk need each other. If they fall out with each other, both of them will suffer significant damage. So for the moment, even if there's uncertainty and the occasional, let's say, frustration, I think they're bound together as president and as unelected co-president.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, you said what they need each other for. I think they need a good economy. Let's talk about that for a second. I mean, we alluded to it with tariffs already today, as Trump calling it Liberation Day. If we look at the pace of these different tariffs that are announced against Mexico, China, now with steel, European Union, you name it, what's the direction of this? Where are we headed with today's announcement, you reckon, and ultimately more with tariffs in the future?
Or the reality is that with the reality TV star named Donald Trump, you don't know until he makes the announcement. That's the way he plays this. The story that his officials were putting out yesterday to the Washington Post is a 20% tariff across the board on almost all products, on almost all countries. But Trump could back away from that. He could decide to put tariffs only on certain products, like he did on cars. He could decide to exempt certain countries who have been lobbying for those exemptions from the tariffs. But I think it is important for us to lay out the reality here. And that is, if Donald Trump does put on, let's say, a 25% tariff across the board on all countries, including Poland, and if the European Union puts on its own tariffs, and if China puts on its tariffs, and Australia puts on its tariffs, and Canada does, an Aston Business School study, highly respected study that came out this week, says that the effect on the global economy could be a loss of 1.4 trillion. That's trillion with a T, trillion dollars. In other words, every country in the world will suffer damage, and a lot of that damage will be suffered by the United States. Does Trump want to go that far? He might try to gamble. He might think, if I put tariffs on all these countries, they will not respond. They will not retaliate. But the signs from the European Union and from Canada is, yes, they are going to push back. They are going to take some damage themselves to avoid being bullied by this man in the White House.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as you said, I mean, we only know once he announces them, but at the same time, I mean, it doesn't seem to be even. If we look at Asia, for instance, I mean, we've had very positive support, it seems, from India. He received Modi in the White House. Also, the Japanese have been received pretty well because they all said they would invest in the United States. Do you see this also at play here? How does this play out long term? And what does Trump ultimately aim for here with tariffs? I mean, as you said, is this his tactic? Does he really think he will make money out of this? Like, how do you characterize it?
Well, I think you've actually highlighted the risk of the tariffs in that, when Modi went to the White House, one reason why he went to the White House was to say, don't put tariffs on our economy, which is growing quite significantly and which is one of the largest economies in the world. When the Japanese said, look, we will buy U.S. products, including liquefied natural gas, which the EU is saying as well, they were saying to Trump, don't put tariffs on this. Now, if Trump goes ahead with the tariffs, he ruins that political goodwill. So the question is, what exactly is doing with the tariffs? And look, let's come back to some fundamentals. One, Donald Trump is a bully. He's a bully as a businessman. He's a bully as a president. That's how he operates. Two, Donald Trump genuinely thinks that the United States has been ripped off because of the way that trade operates around the world. He's thought that since the 1988, when he put it in a New York Times advertisement. Now, in fact, trade doesn't operate that way. Trade operates actually on a win-win basis in goods and services. But Trump, and I must say this to your viewers, does not understand tariffs. He thinks simply that you can use them to replace income tax, when in fact they are an actual tax, a further tax on consumers and producers. And because of that misunderstanding, that lack of understanding, he is willing to go down this very damaging road to satisfy his ego.
Yeah. It's a road that we'll likely see more of it analyze as it continues, the bumpiness continues. Professor Scott Lucas, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks to you and your viewers.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks here on TVP World. Stay tuned, much more coming up right here. Bye-bye.